her latest push towards who did it is TPUSA, even though she will also tell you that 48 hours before Charlie Kirk died, he had officially turned his back on the Jews, and then secondly, he was promising that he was going to bring Candace Owens back. And then I guess after that proclamation, the group just rose up in great organized indignation and shot their leader. I mean, that just doesn't even make sense. Of course, the conspiracies abound about the Kirk assassination. It's really a pity that we can't just let people get on with the investigation so that we can, figure out what happens. I think this is my problem here. I understand that all the internet sleuths are like, they need to know that we are on it so that they can't just throw us a bunch of trash when it actually comes to the trial. Like, don't bring us a bunch of bad evidence to the trial because we weren't on it this whole time. Like, you guys need to feel the pressure because we're looking and analyzing and all this stuff. And so I feel like that's why people are not able to be hands off in this scenario in a way that I think would be helpful. Because right now they're just really muddying the waters. There's all these conspiracy theorists that are just muddying the waters and just coming up with wild allegations, saying wild things. It's gotten to the point now where it's like, at the very beginning of this, I was very invested in what happened, what aren't we being told. I didn't like the letters and the notes that had gone on between the killer and the lover. I thought that was very fraudulent sounding. So at first I was invested in what people were saying, and then I started to get gross vibes because it felt like people were demanding information, that were coming up with things that weren't true. And I found enough inconsistencies. I made a video about that. Found enough inconsistencies that were being repeated over and over and over and just whipping people up into a fury that I thought, I just don't want to invest myself in this kind of conspiracy anymore. Like, why is the base story not good enough? The base story that Tyler Robinson was radicalized online, was invested in a community that he felt was being disrespected by conservatives, and then went out to take the most conservative voice that he could at an event where he was capable of doing it because the security was lax. Why do we need to add to that? That's already a really sad modern tale of how divisive the internet can be. I think we're just desensitized to how divisive the internet is, that to us, that's not a radical story. That is a radical story. This person went and killed somebody because he had developed an idea of who this person was and what their goals and ideals were, that he felt it would be best to silence this person before they could talk any longer. That's radical. That's a crazy story. But no, we have to now be telling all kinds of narratives that TPUSA was in on it, and I would say the person leading the charge here is Candace Owens. Now, after I made that last video where I was like, she is not a good source, we do not need to listen to Candace Owens, I stand by that 100%. And at this point, is it possible to say 1,000%? She has crashed out so hard that I can't believe that she is even up and alive and able to come again with yet another episode. This is a person who immediately upon the death began to profit off of her quote-unquote friend's death with episodes that she was monetizing, doing ad reads for, and promising more content behind a paywall. To me, if I was really invested in figuring out the death of my friend, I can tell you right now that if I was a multimillionaire many times over and so was my husband, I would not be monetizing the content that I was doing in order to find his killer. I think if I wanted to legitimize my concern, I would make sure I didn't make a damn dime on it. And if I did make any money, I would say at the top of every episode, every single cent that I make on these episodes are going straight to Erica Kirk and her family, going straight to the family of my dear friend. Never once has she raised money for Erica, never once has she raised money for TPS USA, and it's probably because now she's saying that they're at fault. At the beginning of this, she said the only people who can stop me are my husband and Erica Kirk. Well, now she's basically saying Erica Kirk did it, so I guess Erica's lost her standing to stop Candace. The thing that's wild to me about Candace is that she seems to assume that the entire world owes her something. I know she has millions of people who watch her, but there's a ton of YouTube channels that have millions of followers. There's zero reason why anybody owes a YouTuber anything. Why does she think that the president's wife of France owes her personal, private DNA or evidence that she was born a woman? She's provided pictures and all kinds of things, but it's never good enough. Candace is always like, no. I'll debunk it this way, this way, this way. That's the thing about a conspiracy theorist. You can always give them evidence of what they've asked for, but they will always find a way to say that's not true because my narrative is this. And they're so biased against anything that contradicts their conspiracy. It's hopeless to try with these people. But Candace has switched the story so many times. She started out saying that she thought that it was the Israelis who had done it, saying that Benjamin Netanyahu, when he unwisely came out the day after the assassination to claim Charlie as his own and waved around a letter saying that, this letter is from Charlie and it's basically a love letter from Charlie. Candace said, that's a real letter, but he's not saying what's true. He's just pulled out different lines. And I'm here to tell you that that was a letter that completely tore Benjamin Netanyahu down, so that he was no good, yada, yada, yada. And so she was very indignant. That letter's going to come out, and she claimed this as one of her receipts as to how Charlie had turned against Israel. And yet, when the letter is released and authenticated and says exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu suggested, that this was a person who really cared about Israel, so much so that the letter is giving examples to Israel of how they might better the information campaign about their own country. Charlie was very invested in helping Israel to turn the narrative around about itself. Suddenly, Candace is going to try to throw shade, throw doubt. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, that letter, I don't know, was it an email? Was it a typed copy? I mean, I don't know. That's really going to make a difference as to whether the words are true or not, or whether they came from Charlie. It's been authenticated. People in his inner circle, yes, Charlie wrote that letter. I knew that he wrote that letter. That is the letter we sent. But suddenly it's I don't know, you guys. This is a person who should have been a lawyer. Because let me tell you, she is peddling that reasonable doubt with every word she says. Because she doesn't prove things, but she's great at planting seeds of doubt in your mind. She will tell you all kinds of things, but she doesn't have any actual sources. Because she has shunned any kind of authentic sources, any kind of actual source that might have been played around with, by the elite. Always seeming to forget that she is the elite. She's married to the son of somebody in the House of Lords. She, by every estimate, would be in the elite circle, yet she's always throwing shade at this group of people, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. But Candace is unable to accept anything from any official source, but she will take anything anybody tells her from the tip line. She will find any rabbit hole on Reddit as a solid source. And look, people could be sending her true things on her tip line. I'm not saying every person who types something in on Reddit is telling you a lie, but what I am saying is this. You can't verify this. There's no... At this point, she has positioned herself where she's going to reject official narratives, and she will take anything from anybody that anyone tells her. And so she always gets to be right. Because they're telling me lies over here, but anything I find over here is good. And she can just kind of weasel and pick apart whatever she wants in order for her story to be true. Case in point. This week, I saw a little bit of footage being peddled around by a lot of different content creators. And it's some footage that this one channel, it's called Milk Bar TV. They're very dedicated to disliking Candace, but they compiled footage from Candace's show in which she is saying one thing, but then showing the reality of it. One of the examples that they showed is that Candace said that she didn't believe the notes that had gone between the murderer and his lover, that these messages didn't sound authentic to her, which was something we all agreed on. The style of the writing was strange. Some of the terms were strange. But one of the words she really wasn't sure about and really insisted that nobody ever uses is the word vehicle. I think I even repeated that, although as I thought about it later, I thought, well, I can think of times when I've said vehicle. Also, Tyler Robinson's dad is in law enforcement, so he may have used the word vehicle. And also, when you consider Tyler's lifestyle, it is not normal according to what normal is usually defined on. This is a person who was living with their gay lover who was in transition and was very invested in a furry community. So I sometimes think that us saying, well, this doesn't sound like the way a typical person would write, I would not categorize his lifestyle as typical. So I think it's interesting we want him to be typical in this context, but are willing to accept he wasn't typical over here. Anyway, he writes this long thing and says the word vehicle, and she's like, see, red flag. I want to ask you right now why anyone would say vehicle when you know that nobody ever uses that word. And that was her big proof that this whole thing was fake. Okay, so footage had come up of him at a traffic stop, which she played for us, in which he was referring to his car as his car and not calling it a vehicle. So she said, see, there we go.
There is 2022 police body cam footage, in case you missed that, of Tyler making a crash report. Take a listen.
Your mom's on her way?
Yeah, she's gonna be a minute. She's got to shuttle over from where she's at to her car and then drive over.
Gotcha.
His mother was going to shuttle over from her car? Interesting.
That is such pathetic evidence. Because even if, in this instance, he happened to call his car, that doesn't mean that he couldn't have said vehicle in another context. This is not all the times he ever had an opportunity to use the word in the note and in the video. Right? But it gets so much worse because she plays that part of the video in order for you to hear him say car. So she can say, see, gotcha. Case closed. Cutting off for you the part where he actually uses the word vehicle. In its full context, this police cam footage of him at a traffic stop has him saying car in one sentence, but then vehicle in the next. Yet she conveniently doesn't show you that part.
Yeah, I was looking up at the light just before getting there.
Okay.
I saw it shift yellow. And as I get into the intersection, he bolts. There was a vehicle in the lane.
That is Candace Owens. Okay? Similarly, the letter from Bibi Netanyahu, she said that letter that he sent was true. That's originally what she said. Charlie Kirk really sent him a letter. Look how he's pulling out sentences to prove his point. It looks to me like he's a liar, because if he was telling you the truth, then he wouldn't need to just pull out a few sentences. Omission is still lying, she says. Well, we know that, Candace. My question is, do you? You know, and then there's all of these times, again, from Milk Bar TV, that show Candace using the word vehicle, even though she claimed that that was some weird kind of police lingo that no human ever uses.
Was particularly asking him to determine who owned a white vehicle, and everyone locally had looked at this vehicle and said, I can help you to just figure out more about this vehicle. And suddenly a president gets shot in a moving vehicle. November 22nd, 1963, JFK was shot. President JFK was shot sitting alongside his wife in a vehicle.
See, so I'm just telling you right now, this is not a reliable person. Now she's going so far as to say that Tyler Robinson wasn't even on the campus. She has it by a source. A source has told her Tyler wasn't even on the campus. He'd never even been there that day. He didn't know anything about being there that day. And they're all just trying to pin this on him, right? She's got this huge story about that. What I don't understand is, why is it that she's always trying to protect these sources? I can't, for his safety, I can't. But now you are becoming everyone's source. Now you're the one who told me. So whatever force you think is going to come down on this individual who told you this information, why do you think that source of evil is not going to come after you now that you've told a much bigger platform, your millions of people who follow you? Aren't you worried for your life? Oh no, because she's so brave. She just wants you to think she's so brave. She's no threat to anyone, because all she's doing is coming up with more trash and more weirdness day after day after day.
In fact, explicitly what it was a Polish underground symbol, like a Polish communist underground symbol that nobody would have recognized outside of people who know what it meant. And I just sort of went, okay, that's weird. I kept looking online, and strangely, I'm not kidding, I'm going to show you these messages, I came across what looked to me like a bunch of people talking about bees. You're going, like literally bees. In a way that the only way I can describe it, she was like, they were speaking about bees, but they weren't speaking about bees. It was very coded.
Were speaking about bees, but they weren't speaking about bees. It was very coded.
No one's scared of Candace Owens at this point because she's talking crazy. Now she's trying to say that TPUSA had something to do with Charlie Kirk's murder. The wildness of this is beyond comprehension. I don't know which one it is with her, because her latest push towards who did it is TPUSA, even though she will also tell you that 48 hours before Charlie Kirk died, he had officially turned his back on the Jews. And then secondly, he was promising that he was going to bring Candace Owens back. And then I guess after that proclamation, the group just rose up in great organized indignation and shot their leader. I mean, that just doesn't even make sense. Candace Owens is peddling things as hard as she can to pretend that TPUSA really, was out to get Charlie. Yet mysteriously, he was going to try to bring her back. I mean, why didn't we hear about this before? Right? Why are we just now hearing that he wanted to bring you back? Seems to me that if his big plan was to turn his back on Israel and bring you in, basically recreate TPOSA and Candace Owens' current image, it seems like that would have been a conversation he would have had with her recently. Being like, Candace, you've been right about Israel. They really are out to lunch. We really need to bring you back in your energy. And yet the last communication she's been able to show us was something from way back in May. Right? But no current conversation was ever had. But suddenly she knows. Who told her this? Who told her, oh, he wanted to bring you back 48 hours before his death. That's what he said. And so, again, is it all about Candace? Because it's almost like she's saying he was killed for wanting me. I was the reason why they finally had to take him out. Candace, why don't you go take care of those 4 kids you have? Okay? Why don't you go make your husband a sandwich since you say you're real big on that?